Well, we need Tony to do the share screen.
Well,
So
I think
I've got to get the PowerPoint up.
you hit you hit share on your screen, and then I'll get a request to share screen, and I'll say
Okay.
yes, and then it'll work.
Send request. I've done that.
Yep. Here we go.
All right. So there's the thing to share. But this isn't how I should be seeing it.
Oh. Um.
I should be
The
seeing like a desktop of all the things that are open on my computer so I can pick out the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
well, usually if you hit share, that's what it'll appear. It's not
Okay,
appearing.
I'll do the share again. Maybe that's the thing I need to do.
Yeah,
If
maybe.
you open your
Okay, here we are. We got it.
okay.
Now, allow. And this, I think, is what I want to share.
Here we go.
Um, so I don't need my own.
Just hit slideshow.
Hit slideshow.
Yep.
Okay.
And then go from play from start on the left.
Play
Go
from
down to the
start.
left. There we go.
There it is. I'm glad you're adept at this. Okay, now I have to, though, get my text back up. So this is so everything should be all right now. So I'm trying to see my PowerPoint and my text at the same time. Um,
I think what you'll have to do is hit the in the upper right corner of your screen. You'll have to hit the full screen or not full screen button, and so you can have half the screen on Zoom and the other half on your notes.
oh,
I think that's
I didn't know about the I'm not quite sure. I mean, I'll be okay, especially if I just move this a little bit over. And then we'll see what happens when I need to change it.
okay.
So this is the opening illustration, which is the tiny little art gallery that existed, the Gladys Montgomery Art Center in our day in Pomona. And the premise of this talk lies in something of a secret harbored in that little structure for just a few years in the early 1970s when it was the effective center of advanced art in the world.
Wow.
Now, few were aware of it then, and despite the best efforts of people like me, that still remains largely the case. But I can probably best start with the name of an artist most people have heard of, who was present in Claremont during those years, 70 to 73, and that was James Turrell. Now, let's see if I go over here and do, hmm, advancing. Oh yeah, I got to remember how to advance.
So you want to go back to your play from start, and then when you put your cursor over on the right of each one, there'll be a little arrow, or you can, depending on your computer, you can click the screen, or you can hit the right facing arrow.
Okay.
Okay, so first go up to play from start, so you're not showing us your whole bar of things on the left.
Huh?
Okay, now if you move your cursor over to the right, You should see a little arrow up in the middle of the screen, maybe to the right edge. Yep, go over it. Boop, go down, down, down. Okay. A little arrow should show up that you could click on to
Yeah,
start.
I'm used to seeing that. I'm actually not a,
Okay,
I'm
what?
not, oh, wait a minute. I've got it down in the lower left. Let's see if that works. Okay, that works.
There we go.
And to, I'm just going to have to do this to get back to remind myself where I was. James Turrell, Jim Turrell, as he was to everyone who knew him at Pomona, is famous for his light spaces, such as the one you're looking at, and for the colossal installations that he has created in the Roden crater. Now, let's see if I move this. Oops. Yeah, if I do this just manually on the side, I think it works the best. Near Flagstaff, where he has been sculpting this enormous dead volcano since 1973. Now, how he got there and how he started to do that is all bound up with his latter day experiences at Pomona. When I say latter day, the early 70s were 10 years after he had been just a regular undergraduate at Pomona. Has anything happened to the image on your end? Are you looking at my text now?
No, we're looking at the volcano
Okay, good.
and the
Everything's
sculpture.
good then. Everything's good. Uh,
It's not full screen for us, but I'm not sure
I'm
on
not
your end how to do that. Maybe
no,
Leslie
I'm
can
not
help.
sure either. And bear with me. I didn't have a chance to rehearse this whole thing.
Well, if you want to make it full screen, you have to hit the play from start button, and then you should be able to advance the screen. I don't know which computer you have by hitting, the little up, down, left, right arrows. You can hit one of those to the right. See?
Okay, now
But on the other hand, Tom, this will work if it's too much of a struggle to figure it out the other way.
Yeah,
It'll work.
this is good enough. And yeah, why don't we'll just keep doing it the way you're doing. This is good enough. We can see the vaulting in.
Okay, so where is this, Tom, in the volcano
You're,
thing?
you're mute, Tom. You're
Tom, you're
muted.
mute.
Oh,
You're
you
muted.
muted yourself. You muted yourself, so undo that.
Lower left hand icon of a microphone, very lower left hand.
it did
There you
somehow.
There
go.
we
There
go.
you go.
There we go.
There you go.
Where was the volcano, Tom? Where is this done?
It's just east of Flagstaff in an ancient, seismic volcanic field.
And how what's I don't want to interrupt your flow here. What's the scale
It
of
may
this
be
thing?
better for me just to improvise. I'm thinking.
What's the scale of the thing we're looking at?
Well, I think the width of the roads, these would be narrow two-lane roads. Um, and you see up here, this is probably single lane. Um, it's going to be a good
Okay.
mile across.
Yeah, okay.
I think that can give you some idea. And he found it flying, and that's a big part of his story. In 73, when he had to leave his position at Pomona under duress, which we will be getting to. Now, this is more or less how he looked at that point, end of the 60s, early 70s. I couldn't find a photo of him In his earlier, 18-year-old incarnation, he arrived at Pomona in 61, age 18, just like the rest of his class. But how he got there was a real departure from normal experience, not because he wouldn't have been a prize, applicant. He was Pasadena Boy of the Year, Eagle Scout, lots of other, honors in his early life, a licensed and very skilled pilot at the same time. But in the year before that, 1961, so 60, he came for 61, 62. The year before that, 50, 60, 61, maybe beginning a bit earlier in 59. He was definitely flying his plane, but he wasn't flying it around Southern California. He was flying it there, which is an image of the Tibetan plateau,
Wow.
where he had been recruited by the CIA to fly unmarked aircraft delivering relief supplies to the Buddhist monks who were staging an uprising against the People's Republic of China and had to flee into exile into northern Nepal. And the CIA, realizing that the Buddhists and this uprising were a thorn in the side of China, were encouraging them and sustaining them. Now, he has spoken about how hair-raising it was doing this, and that aircraft were lost, an experiment in trying to use helicopters to mount the face of the plateau had been disastrous, and people and machines were lost. It was a uh, uh, to say he was fulfilling his military obligations as a conscientious objector while he was ostensibly still in high school. His family, for several generations going back, were devout Quakers, and so was he, and so as he remained in the course of his life, and therefore a pacifist, and immediately seeking out, relief from the military draft. Having made himself available in that way, his willingness to serve was seized upon, knowing that he could fly these relief missions, and so he was put into that duty as a way of fulfilling his military obligation. And having fulfilled it over the course of a year, when you think of the intensity and danger in which he put himself, that was no doubt sufficient to fulfill that obligation. And what something that's not really known widely, but I had heard it from him that his admission to Pomona didn't, yeah, when would he have filled out his application? Was sort of effected by the people who ran the program in which he had been enlisted, and he was more or less placed at Pomona. And of course, just because, he was the sort of person who would have gone to Pomona anyway. And so there he began, just like anybody else. He never spoke about this, as far as I can tell, to any of his classmates. And even though he was destined to be, one of the most famous artists in the world, he didn't take studio art when he was at Pomona because in the Quaker ethos, making vain aesthetic objects is a vanity, something that you would avoid. He majored in perceptual psychology, which I seem to remember was a pretty strong thing at Pomona in those days. And you could imagine flying as he did, where, being aware of your position, your circumstances, what you can see and not see is, life and death often. So that would make a lot of sense. But he did do ceramics. And ceramics in Claremont was a very big deal then, at both scripts in Pomona. John Mason, who would become one of, the best known ceramic artists, was teaching, introductory art. Some of you might have met him. In any event, when he finished, he sort of got over the Quaker strictures on pursuing art to a degree, sufficiently so that he applied to the MFA program at the new University of California campus at Irvine. And these, very dramatic and stunning photographs were taken by no less than Ansel Adams when the
Wow.
campus opened. And the MFA program at Irvine set out from the beginning to be different than any other program, at least then, in that there were really no requirements and no supervision. Tried to hire the best artists from the region and outside it to be the faculty, but they were simply there to impart their attitudes, their presence, their thought processes. There was no instruction. And Terrell embarked, first of all, on a series of what he called sculptures, which were made from various kinds of gas flames. That is something completely immaterial, which he did feel would not fall under the Quaker strictures against making vain objects. And it was his trying to manipulate the light and color of these flames that ultimately led him to the light projection pieces for which he first became famous. He was also commuting back and forth to Pasadena, where he was a regular attendee at the Orange Grove Friends Meeting House. This Quaker congregation was also a center for anti-war activity. And he began having been, a rather extraordinary conscientious objector already, was counseling young men who wanted to apply for that status. But the law around conscientious subjection read that anyone encouraging someone to be a conscientious objector, urging them to do it, was against the law. You could, tell them how to facilitate it, but there would be, no room for advocacy. What happened was he found himself talking to two people, a mother and her son, so he thought. And when the session was finished, he was arrested in the parking lot because they turned out to be FBI ringers.
Jeez.
And he was convicted and sent to a federal prison in Texas in the spring of 1966. So that, put an end to his MFA studies in Irvine. from what I can tell, because he's partly is frank and disclosing about this, and partly he doesn't say very much. But he seems to have remained there in that Texas prison for only about 6 months. But according to his own testimony, he spent most of the time in solitary confinement because he couldn't bear or was afraid to be in the middle of the general population. When he did get out, he did not go right back to school, but he went and found a studio down in Ocean Park, which was then a sort of, run-down area of Los Angeles. Very hard to believe that now. And he established a studio in an abandoned hotel called the Mendota, where he began just making really super ephemeral art that was based on letting in some light and blocking other light coming from the ambient environment, and then making these patterns which would disappear as soon as he changed the shades and shutters, or as the light outside was altered over the course of the day. So this would be the ultimate unsaleable, immaterial, unexhibitable art. In fact, nobody saw it except for people, friends of his, who he would invite over for sessions in creating these kinds of light patterns. Ultimately, though, by using just standard issue, slide projectors, he was able to get the light to do more remarkable things. Things that are very hard to capture in photographs, but this kind of illusory cube in the corner of this room was a good example of making these simple geometric shapes, which were absolutely not there, just made out of light. And in 1967, he had a very successful exhibition at the Pasadena Museum of Art, brokered by one of his teachers from Irvine. But having, gotten a lot of attention, written up in Art Forum, he just walked away and went back to the Mendota for these ephemeral, light manipulation sessions. Just before he came back to Claremont, there was a new chair of the art department, a really interesting artist named Maury Baden, who persuaded Turrell to take a faculty position. And as he had never finished his MFA, he also signed up for the MFA program at the Claremont Graduate School. So he was both a student and a teacher at the same time during those years. And one of the things that he would have seen in the gallery to begin with was a remarkable installation by a young artist who had started actually as an Irvine undergraduate, Michael Asher, also from Pasadena, who designed a kind of parasitical architecture on the inside of the gallery, such that all of its normal surfaces and furniture and structures would be entirely hidden. So it would be behind these sort of propped up drywall studs. And what you would see on the inside was just this. The only light that entered the gallery was the light that came from the outside. So you can see a kind of meeting of the minds between Asher and Turrell in this regard. And as far as the aperture or entry into the space that Asher designed, he didn't build it. Maury Baden and the current gallery director, Hal Glicksman, were the ones who built the whole thing. But part of the structure was an imposition of a fixed entrance where the doors to the gallery used to be, which was open all the time, 24 hours a day. And so this is in 1970. The student body is prone to sort of nocturnal rambling, and this space was something that you could wander in and out of at will. And there are some good photographs. I love this one in particular of people on the inside. See, this is the interior gallery, which was only illuminated through this slot from the light that was coming in through that permanently open entrance. This is the outer part with enough light in the middle of the day to, I think, record some typical student activities that Asher's installation had brought about. But it had a really one really lovely kind of very traditional aesthetic outcome, though not achieved in any traditional way, which is that when you looked back out the fixed frame of the fixed entrance, there was a picture, a picture of the little park that used to be next to the president's house. The garden in the desert of Southern California. You could put all kinds of labels to it, but it wasn't a picture. Of course, it was reality. It was the actual thing, though transformed aesthetically by Asher's installation. What he was most interested in was actually the way that sound and air movements and light penetrated and moved through the space. So consistent with a lot of preoccupations, Turrell's being one, but lots of other of what were called the light and space artists of Los Angeles of that era. Robert Irwin, who has been one of Turrell's teachers at Irvine, was a kind of leader of that pack. Now, Turrell was not the last Pomona graduate of this period to decide to be an artist and to go to the Irvine MFA program in order to achieve that. The next one, 4 years later, because he was in our class, 69, was Chris Burden. And probably most people are familiar with Chris these days, sadly taken from us a few years ago, for his extraordinary urban light installation on Wilshire Boulevard outside of the LA County Museum. Probably the most beloved work of art in Southern California, if not further afield. But for his first, I can't show you everything he did in his first year or two at Irvine, but his MFA graduation project, this is the little flyer he made up, or very, plain, strict, geometric little announcement, was to be found in locker 5 in room 167, which was basically just a corridor with lockers on the wall where the art students, kept their supplies. But what Chris contrived to do was they were, 3 high, was to fold himself up to the point that he could get into the middle locker and stay there, but no one could see him. And water was in the upper locker, illumination was in the lower one. And the piece consisted, of course, of him doing that, but as far as any spectator or public knowledge was concerned, simply telling people that this was the case, even though they had no way visually to confirm whether that was true or not. And he kept silent the whole time, though the people who came to see the work did not keep silent. Or in fact, they turned it into this sort of pilgrimage site, and they would put up these not that he could see them, these messages and tokens and so on. And there was always a gathering out in the hallway outside the gallery, and they would try to talk to him, try to get him to speak. And he said it really made him nervous because, he wasn't sure that somebody would, try something drastic just because it seemed to put people in a very sort of aggravated mood, or, a kind of feeling of affinity and closeness with him. But it was turned into a whole kind of psychological experiment where the making of the art could orchestrate a wider range of behavior, which I think was one of the sort of ethos markers of this whole zone of art, and one in which Turrell was participating as well. This is a great photo of the studio art faculty right around 1970, 71 or so, including our class of 69 classmate Hap Tivy over here on the left, who was working as Turrell's chief assistant at the time. And it'll take probably a minute for you to figure out which one he is, because he altered his appearance from the way we saw him from 68, 69. And here he is in this heavy sort of lumberjack shirt with a full beard and watch cap, in the sort of plainness and unpretentiousness of a Quaker adept. Here's Maury Baden, Guy Williams, David Gray, and Louis Baltz, whom we always knew as Duke Baltz, who probably, after Turrell, became the most, publicly successful artist. In fact, he's quite a major figure in the history of post-war photography. And like Turrell, he was both teaching and completing his MFA. So Turrell, for one, got busy doing works of art because he was a student and he had to, he had to make stuff for his mentors to evaluate. And one of them was this piece, which was called Burning Bridges. And you'll all recognize Bridges Hall of Music. At a signal, he had planted flares, highway flares in boxes of sand behind the pillars, and the students who were working with them set them off all at once and created this eerie red glow, into big bridges being all white, it was just perfect for reflecting that. The Claremont Fire Department came, someone called them when they saw it, which became, again, part of the sort of performative aspect that these gestures that all of these artists, Asher, Burden, and Turrell, are doing in this period. Related, but much more overt, was what the aforementioned Dick Barnes was doing. So in the spring of 72, he put on this really elaborate sort of pageant called The Life and Death of Buster Quinine, which was a great sort of paper mache puppet, which was carried on a float partly built. Here is Bob Wilson, a really adept local sculptor and graphic artist, who was, I think, kind of in charge of the, stagecraft of the thing. And the whole procession with everybody who was attending marched out to one of those quarries to the east of Pitzer, where there was a descent from the road through an arch that had been, blasted out of there, through the use of the trucks, down to this underground state. Terrell and Tivy were very much involved, and they were manipulating these anti-aircraft sort of movie premiere light columns, and pointing them at the sky, pointing them at the moon, and then as a culmination, here's the structure now exploded. Buster Quinine was sent to, Kingdom Come, and the fireworks went off in the sky. So, yeah, very,
Tom,
very, ultra kind of symbolic, neo-primitive kind of countercultural performance.
was this the event when the group from Vermont came, the Bread and Puppet Theater? Or was
I
that was in the 60s, I think.
I saw the Bread and Puppet Theater. Andy Doe was very close to them, and I think you brought them as a sort of sidebar to the theater program. But yeah, but that I'm sure that Barnes was there too, and
Same location, I think.
uh, yeah, quite possible. I seem to remember them on the quad, but it's going back a long way. But you're right to point that out. So anyway, you can see that, to get back to Terrell as our kind of, for the moment, kind of guiding figure, he was really in the thick of things. So much so that there was an episode inside the Montgomery Gallery where there had been, I guess, a fairly long-standing tradition of an annual faculty tea presided over by the college president, who was David Alexander by this time. And this is Helene Weiner, really the catalyst for much of what went on around the gallery and in Claremont art in general. She had been in London. She had worked at the Whitechapel Gallery when it was a kind of hotbed of newer experimental art, and she got the job at Pomona. And those were the kinds of artists she looked to and the kinds that she wanted to show. However, you can probably recognize some of the people in this picture. This is David Alexander. This is one of my teachers, Lee McDonald from the political science department. This is Wedby, I think, isn't it? At any event, Alexander looked to Aline with the expectation that she would pour the tea. The only woman in the room. Well, not exactly, but the only faculty woman in the room. And she refused. And it was a kind of standoff. Alexander was sort of insisting, and she was insisting back. Uh, and the person who saved the day, you would have seen briefly here, was Terrell, who now is in sort of full 19th century Quaker regalia, which he was wearing in those days. And he sat down and poured the tea and smoothed things over. But that confrontation between Alexander and Helene Weiner was a sort of, uh, bad omen for what was going to come. And you can see how consistently Terrell, this is funny sort of photograph someone took of Helene here and Terrell here on a field trip to San Francisco. So you can see he's still wearing it, really on every occasion. Now, the people that Helene was showing in the gallery included this rather extraordinary figure, Bastian Otter. I can attest a really charismatic person who had made his way from Holland and started studying for his Masters of Fine Arts in Claremont, and very close to Turrell. He was so winning a person that he was really friends with every Bob Wilson, everybody who was around at that moment. And here he is in his Master of Fine Arts exhibition, which was held up at Scripps. But his art, which was still sort of object-based, pictorial, as you can see here, no time to kind of explain what it was all about. But what matters is what he began to do, which are things that were ephemeral, um, sort of caught on the fly, very much like what Turrell was doing. This was a piece he did at Mount Sac. He had a teaching job over there. And in his studio there, he simply set up this, wrote on the wall and set up this single spotlight and left. And so because the fact that he had gone, who the "Please Don't Leave Me" applies to was left in suspension. It was taking his own self, his own body, and treating it as a kind of vulnerable, pathetic instrument. Now he had this charming little arts and crafts bungalow, he and his wife, Mary Sue, just south of campus. They're all gone now, replaced with garden apartments. But here he is actually walking on the roof of their bungalow, which would subsequently become pretty well known. Bastian Otter, you'll see in a moment why he's an enigmatic and highly romantic figure, if not known to the general public, which he is. Um, the house became known to the general public as well. On the left is the poster he did for his MFA show, with this kind of pictorial installation sculpture sitting on what appears to be a roof, modeled on the roof of his own bungalow. And this is a piece he did, which he called "All My Clothes," which just consisted of his gathering up his sort of meager wardrobe from inside the bungalow and disposing them across the roof of the house, which just seems like one of these prosaic gestures that a lot of people were doing in the name of sort of conceptual art and performance during this period. But when you sort of linger over it, it's got a very uncanny, morbid character, like a sort of dismemberment or a death in a way, which was, I think, very much in keeping with his sensibility and his intentions. Oh my God. Now let's see if this will play. There we go. This has become the great bungalow work. And that's it. That was the piece, but undertaken, I think, at not trivial physical risk to him. Uh, and taking this sort of art of gesture, just this kind of simple proposition. Oh, I'm gonna spend 5 days in a locker, and then you just do it. Or I'm gonna fall off the crest of my bungalow all the way into the shrubbery below, and you do it. And it is made manifest either as a sort of physical witnessing, the way Chris did his piece, or in this rough and ready video or film. It was originally a film, uh, video not really having come around yet. So he was shown in the gallery by Helene Weiner. This is a sort of photo booth picture of herself she did, which I like just to kind of evoke her presence. And among the fixed exhibitions she did, she also, in the spring of 73, put on a cycle of performance works. And here you see the announcement again, just very plain, straightforward, sort of is what it is. Chris did one, which I'll talk about in a moment. The first one was done by a really wonderful artist in person named Hiroko Saka, Japanese native, still alive, and a member of a Buddhist monastery in Los Angeles. His piece looked like this. This was the gallery, as it was before Asher covered it up. And he set this situation up where he got under an electric blanket, and the wires and controls of blanket are really part of the physical piece, had it turned up on high and then covered up with dirt, with a lot, hundreds of pounds of earth, and stayed there for, I can't remember exactly how long, but a really disturbing amount of time. And there's some well-known art world types, Al Ruppersberg, Bill Levitt. Here is Leslie Burden, Chris's wife, Wolfgang Sterkel, who's going to do another performance subsequent to Heroes. And here actually is is me in 1973, because I just got sort of impatient with everybody just hugging the wall, which is what they were doing. And while Hero was just out there suffering right in the middle of the gallery. So I went I don't know, just kind of looked if I could see how he was doing. He was vigorous enough, and you can see here, to start climbing out of the duress that he put himself into, and in fact, taking on this kind of danger to oneself had become a pretty common thing. The Basada Fall One was definitely in that category. Chris, of course, in his famous performances, did a lot of things that endangered his safety and his body. Here's John Baldessari, the kind of the guru and mentor of this whole generation. So, and he was coming with his students from Cal Arts. They were driving all the way down just to make sure they were there. That's how important, the events that Helene and her artists were doing were to the whole development of art in Los Angeles. This is the piece that Chris and Barbara did. She lay down on the floor, as you can see, with no clothes on. And Chris, dressed all in white, was making those little tinfoil match head rockets, putting them on bent paper clips, lighting them, and then firing them in her direction. For those of you who know your art history, there is a very esoteric reference to the large glass by Marcel Duchamp in this gesture, which he's making a kind of reality. Um, which is called The Bride Stripped Bare. That's its official name. And it has little smudges, black smudges on it from Duchamp firing these match rockets at it. And this was done, in 2019. So what would happen if you did it in reality? I think is one of the propositions that Chris's piece is trying to actuate. The third one was Sturkle, who did a piece which also involved physical pain, but of a very internal kind. He was endeavoring to make the piece out of the painful control of his own urination, which also entailed a rolled up carpet. And I don't remember the details all that well, but it got written up in Student Life. Uh, a conservative alumnus saw the review, complained to David Alexander, and Alexander fired Helene Weiner over it. But under the Terrell's leadership, as he was the ringleader, the faculty, the whole art faculty, went to Alexander and said they would resign as a body if he didn't reinstate Helene, which he refused to do, and they all quit. For some, at considerable duress because they had been dependent on, on the income and so on. It certainly upset Terrell because right at the same moment that he walked out of his job, he lost his studio in Ocean Park to a real estate investment trust. And so he just decided he was going to get in his plane. He was going to start flying over the Southwest looking for a place to make a new kind of art. And that was when he discovered the Rodin crater. Here it is in his sort of raw condition as he first saw it. Now, in the kind of interim period when both he and Boss Otter were still teaching at Irvine, but living in LA, they would get into Terrell's plane in at the Santa Monica airport and fly down to Irvine to teach their classes. So they were very close to one another, and Otter's own history, Bastian Otter's own history, also entailed a certain amount of duress just built into it. In fact, he first got to Los Angeles by crewing on well, it's kind of described here, the 40-foot catch Felicidad, which had set off from Morocco and then entered up in all kinds of difficulty and had to be rescued off of Baja, and they were brought to LA. But that doesn't mean that Otter wasn't a good sailor. In fact, he was, I think, by all accounts, an exceptionally good sailor. And he contrived a very elaborate sort of allegorical three-part work of art, the third part of which entailed him sailing from North America back to Europe. And this was the boat. It was 12 and a half feet long. And at the time, it would have been the shortest craft ever sailed solo across the North Atlantic. So he was set off from Falmouth and Cape Cod, and he was going to arrive in Ireland. And it seems that he was perfectly capable of doing that, but didn't make it. At the very end, the boat was lost, and he was lost until it was discovered by some Basque fishermen who towed it back to Spain. Some record of the condition in which the boat was in when they found it. And as best people can make out, he didn't make it because a propane stove exploded and sunk the boat, which, made him, when I talked about him becoming this enigmatic and romantic figure that young artists still want to know about and has a sort of aura and presence in their minds. That untimely, really unfortunate death, which was incurred in the interests of completing a piece of art in this mode of performance, which was full of kind of poetic subject matter, but effected through the most kind of direct material ways it possibly could, both in terms of the art apparatus and the the artist putting his, in this case, it's all men, putting his body and physical safety on the line. Um, and with Otter's death, it was there were a number of them in the 1970s. It really is a decade of death of some of the most important artists, I think, who ever lived in this period, starting with Eva Hesse in 1970. She died of cancer. Robert Smithson died in 1973 in a plane crash looking over an earthwork installation of his in Texas. Bastian Otter dies in 75 on this voyage. Gordon Motta Clark, whom you might not know about, dies in 1978, also from cancer. If we'd had those four artists for their natural lifespans, my firm belief is that we would have a completely different art world than the one we have now. And that is part of my argument for the centrality of what was sort of hatched in Claremont during this remarkable period. There's a sort of depressing coda about it that after all the faculty left, Alexander brought in a couple of ringers who turned it into just a work day, unremarkable kind of service studio department who oversaw the publication a commemorative book or booklet marking the significant anniversary in the history of studio art at Pomona when the period between 1970 and 1973 was never mentioned. It was
No.
just eradicated from historical memory. So those confrontations, over the tea and over Sturkell's full bladder had, went deep in ways that it's really hard to, deep in those who somehow felt that their world had been uh, messed with and changed in ways that they couldn't abide. Um, that persisted. But since a project that we sort of did collectively back in 2010, 2011, when I was at the Getty Research Institute, it was all about trying to bring this period back. There was an important show that was done in the much enlarged Pomona Gallery, now even further enlarged. A great catalog called It Happened at Pomona, which I recommend if you can lay your hands on it. And so maybe slowly but surely, this is coming back and being an art historian. I wanted to get this back into the history. So I'll stop there. I don't know what my improvising the whole talk did to my timing, but I hope it wasn't too long and that it had something intriguing about it for you.
If you Google on Google Maps or Google Earth Broden crater, in Arizona, you can see the installation there. There's
Yeah,
photographs.
he's got elaborate inner rooms and entryways and staircases and so on that penetrate down into the crater, which he'll never say is finished. And so it has been pretty much offline the whole time, though a number of celebrities have been able to go who have made major donations to his keeping up with the work. But it's not public, really. I haven't seen it.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, my pleasure.
Yeah, it was a bunch of stuff I didn't know about. On back to the volcano, you just talking about the first picture didn't show the road. Did he actually construct the road too?
Well, yeah, I mean, he would have gotten the contractors in from Flagstaff and overseen it. I mean, Terrell is pretty capable. I mean, one of the things that he found was that there was a tax dispensation in Arizona he acquired a very large parcel of land around the crater because he didn't want any ambient light. For somebody who
Wow.
had made his art out of ambient light to begin with, now he didn't want any. So he didn't want anybody opening up a gas station or something within view of the crater. So he found ways to buy up all this land, which was expensive, to amortize. But he found that there was a big financial break he would get if he became and was using the land as a cattle rancher. So
Hmm.
that's what he's done. It is a cattle ranch, and he has become somebody who knows how to run a cattle ranch and a beef operation in order to keep the crater from being besmirched with artificial light.
The aerial or the satellite photographs on Google Earth are pretty extraordinary. But the installations all around the crater.
Yeah. Yeah, it's become, in a way, a certain echo of, say, the Hopi Mesas, which are not very far away from there, and something about which he has been cognizant and apparently has been in discussions with not treating the land in ways that would be, because it's right under the San Francisco peaks, which are sacred to the Hopi, and to make it so not entirely unobtrusive, but in fact, I think it's turning into a sort of mesa-like dwelling um, uh, in what I expect he believes is harmony with the existing kind of Anasazi structures and sites. There are a few very ruins that are very close by that had been there for, hundreds of years.
Tom, did you
Did
mention I missed the very beginning, but did you mention the Terrell uh, installation that's at Pomona now?
Yeah, Fred, I have to confess, I made a new introduction, sort of about how this episode is unknown to so many people. So I didn't talk about that, but yes, he does makes work widely, which are spaces in which a combination of changing sunlight and hidden LEDs create these color effects. And he did one for Pomona, and they're called sky spaces, because by isolating the sky from all the earthbound things that we use to kind of calibrate it, it becomes a zone of almost pure color, which is very hard to credit. You somehow you're not seeing the sky anymore. You're seeing a kind of pure light and color experience. So he built one at Pomona, and Fred's class of 71 had their dinner right next to it. So I did a version of this talk for them for the entertainment on that evening. And Fred invited me, for which I am grateful. And that so even though I didn't read the talk, I wrote it for that occasion. So and made the PowerPoint. So that's why this exists.
Hmm.
It was a great talk, and this one mirrors that. It was great to hear it again.
Um, I just was looking it up, and it says that it has um, it's an installation that aligns with celestial phenomena with 23 planned chambers. So it
Yes.
sounds like there's so much underneath there.
Oh
Um,
yeah, definitely. They're how to say sort of entrances like manholes, with ladders or stairs going down, but that doesn't do their refinement sufficient credit. Uh, they look to me, the pictures I've seen of them a little bit like sort of 50s and 60s science fiction sets, the wise lords of some planet, who live some kind of enlightened existence, It's all, I hope they're better and more than that when you actually get to see them, but something of that kind of aesthetic seems to have crept into the way that because they're heavily designed, the staircases and so on, the architectural, elements and accessories.
But you say they can't be visited.
They can't, sorry,
They can't be visited
not by just anybody.
like
It
me.
requires an invitation, and in most cases, a fairly hefty donation to supporting the work.
And are they photographically represented any place?
Yeah, you can find lots of photographic representation. He hasn't held back on that, both on the outside and on the inside. And there been publications. Someone I know in academia, a theologian named Mark Taylor, has written a whole section of a book about it.
Did this is kind of a movement here. It's the ephemeral nature of it and the use of light as substantial part of. I mean, light itself is a substantial part of the installation. Has this spawned any imitators, or is there a school elsewhere? New York, Paris, whatever, doing similar kinds of things? Are there
Well, there were
imitators or
there were a lot of artists doing. When I talked about this light and space group of artists, that is a much bigger group, and I sort of emphasized it in the case of Michael Asher because he's not often seen as being part of that, but he was, and he was doing, in a way, a sort of low-tech version just by using studs and drywall and the existing structure of the gallery. He was able to make all these things happen inside the space. So it was a very sensory kind of thing and physical kind of thing. He was really taken with the way that the air moved through the space. Also, the way the sound of the trains, our old friends, the Santa Fe freight trains that would rumble by the campus, would be altered by bouncing around the walls and so on.
wow,
And that was what he would do when he was in the space. He would be kind of tracking and monitoring these things to his own satisfaction.
wow.
Tony,
Um,
Tony, in answer to your question, our classmate, 68, Stephen Weiss's wife, Lillian Lynn, has installations. There's one on Mount Wilson Observatory that
Hmm.
broadcasts over that part of Southern California. And she's done a lot of stuff that I've seen in England that uses light as and changing light, ephemeral light.
Yes, I mean Robert Irwin, who was teaching at Irvine, both Terrell and Asher and a number of other people had gone from making paintings that tried to capture the sort of fleetingness of light. It's a kind of abstract impressionism to an extent. And he painted with lots of little dots to doing more environmental room-based pieces using muslin scrim that filtered and altered the light. And, he felt that the whole space and the whole, sensorium that these works created was the work. And certainly Terrell took that idea on board. Doug Wheeler was a strict contemporary of theirs who did things that were a little more sort of stagey and required um, curved sort of fiberglass covered full scale walls in order to work. And he's still making work. The David Zwirner Gallery in New York is a big sponsor of his, so he still lives in Los Angeles. But their work was really popular in Europe and was shown a lot. There was a very important exhibition that the Tate put on right in this moment, right around 1970 to kind of introduce them, and then they showed in Amsterdam and in Germany and so on. So this was really to the taste of Europeans at that juncture. Haptivi became a kind of light-based environmental artist as well, in turn, and has had a long career. He was teaching at Bard from where he retired a while back. Yeah, so it really was, and the work itself, even if it's less sort of grandiose, say Larry Bell's glass cubic sculptures, in which the glass is has mineral deposits on it, which allows the light to change color and intensity as it enters and leaves. The cubes has been really a staple of post-war art, which he made over decades, and that definitely fits into the light and space ethos, or the use of cast resin with translucent pigments, which both Pomona graduate Helen Pashkian has done really brilliantly over her long career, and an LA artist originally from New York, African American, named Fred Eversley, who died just recently, was making work that was very much in dialogue with Helen's using cast resin, which is a surfboard technology, and in transparent or translucent, depending on how you want it, that these artists were able to turn into these freestanding sculptures that definitely draw the light into them and expel it, So across that spectrum, yeah, that's kind of what a lot of Los Angeles art was about.
Sounds like stuff your brother would do. Hey, Crow, what happened to all the people that lost their jobs due to the firings?
I don't know in every case. Guy Williams, who was a super abstract painter, somebody who, when I was hanging around Claremont myself in these years, I felt sort of most inspired by. I think he got a job maybe at Santa Barbara City College, and he was teaching up there, and all those extraordinary paintings he was keeping in one warehouse, which burned. And so all the work was lost, which I
Oh my
think is
God.
just a really a tragedy. Uh, Louis Baltz, he went off and became famous. I mean, Leo Castelli was selling his photographs in New York. He was the only photographer that Castelli showed in his gallery. And he was, having shows all over it, very avidly collected. So he was fine. Terrell was fine. Um, Maury Baden was fine too. He carried on for a while as chair of Pomona, but then his wife, who was Canadian, seems to have wanted to go back to Canada, so he became chair of the studio program uh, uh, no, on Vancouver Island. What's the main city on Vancouver Island? Somebody tell me. Victoria,
Victoria.
at the University of Victoria. And he
You
spent
could
his career there. He came back when we were doing those events around 2010, 11. And it was great for me to get to know him as a grown up when I'd only seen him as a rather imposing. And I could talk about Baden's art as well, which had a human body experiential dimension to it, but brought about in quite a different, manner.
Crow, I
Dave
think you can
Gray, I don't know about. He got hurt very badly in an earthwork piece that a student was doing, and a wall fell in on top of him.
oh.
So I don't know how fit he was to go on. But I didn't really know him, so I haven't kept up.
I think you can stop the share now, Tom, too, probably.
Okay, I will do that. I can see that without help. There we go.
just just so we probably want to close it out, as unfortunate as that is. I was just, everything that you talked about was unfamiliar to me, and pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I want to thank you. That was absolutely fascinating. And I knew that Terrell was a Quaker, but I didn't know the early history. And that was just amazing.
Well,
Other artists,
if
I
you
wasn't
go around
familiar.
to all the people in the art world, people who say James Turrell with a reverent note in their voices, uh, have no idea that that happened.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And the story at Pomona. So I'm at UC Davis now, okay? And that's another place that claims to have had a big artistic presence, but it was so much more conventional. You think of Wayne Thiebaud and Gregory Condos and Roy, whatever his face is, with the it and the
William Wiley.
yeah, yeah, and but it's so much more in the conventional painting and sculpture world, and these experiential artists, it's a whole different perception of artistic experience. So I really appreciate this. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
that's very kind of you. Thank you, Laurel.
Thank you, Tom.
My
I
pleasure,
think
Bob. Good to see
as
you
Great
after
Thanks,
all
talk.
these
Tom.
years.
art, there is a classmate of ours, Michael Brewster, whose sculptural skills were right up there with Rodin, in my opinion.
Oh
And he
yeah,
went
he
into
Michael, I couldn't talk about everybody, and probably it was long enough. Yeah, Michael was doing ephemeral experience as well, but with sound. Yeah. And he taught at the Claremont Graduate School for the
exactly at the
larger
same
part of
time.
his career. He was the one who well, he wasn't on the faculty when the brouhaha blew up. So he was able to. I don't think he was on the Pomona faculty, but on the CGS faculty.
By the way, did anybody notice a couple days ago there was an obituary in the New York Times for the guy who invented windsurfing? And it mentioned about two-thirds of the way through the article all the stuff he'd done with surfboards, and I think he was from San Diego. And then it happened to mention that he went to Pomona.
Oh, really? I don't know off the top of my head who that is.
Oh my God, this has got to be Clark, right? From Clark Foam. Yeah, there's a Pomona grad who was the core of surfing because he's the one that figured out how to do foam surfboards with fiberglass. Oh my
No
God.
more balsa.
No
Yeah,
more balsa. Made them about 50 times lighter. Oh my God.
the,
Yeah.
the guy who was always known as Grubby Clark
Yeah, that would be the one.
was a Pomona graduate. I didn't know that.
Okay, well, it's hard to bring us to an end, but let's plan on Leslie next time, right? You're going to continue,
Yeah.
and we still have people that I'm going to bug to do presentations. So, but anyway, we know what we're going to do next time, and that's Leslie and Tom. Thank you very much. That was
Yeah.
really
This is
unusual.
really good. Yeah, yeah.
Tom, come back anytime. We'd love to have you back to visit, even just to listen and
Yeah.
comment.
Yeah, well, I've got
Agreed.
the link now. I'd be very curious to hear what everybody else has to say.
Yeah, Tuesday, Thursdays at 10.
Yeah.
It's so
They're
much
all,
fun
they're
hearing.
all recorded. All of these are recorded, so you can look at them at your leisure.
Okay, the library.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Good to see everyone.
All
And
right. All
Thank
right.
you,
All
Tom.
right,
next
guys.
time.
All right.
See you next time.